The marketplace was full of noise, bright lights, and strange smells. In a distant part of the galaxy, the bustling market was known for selling things that no one should ever have to buy. Humans, aliens, and all kinds of species walked around, looking for items, food, and sometimes even people. It was a place where cruelty was often hidden behind the sounds of deals being made. Among the people in the market was a girl who stood out. She wasn't like the others. Her appearance was different, her body slender, but marked with signs of hardship. Her skin, a light shade of green, was covered in scars from years of suffering. She stood silently, looking down at the ground, unsure of what was going to happen next. This was her life now, moving from one sale to the next, never sure of what the future held, always hoping that maybe, just maybe, someone would show kindness. Her eyes darted around, looking for any sign of help, but the others around her only saw her as an object, something to be sold. She had learned long ago not to expect kindness, not to hope for anything other than the next command from a cruel master. She kept her head low and tried not to show any emotion. To do so would only invite more pain. But deep inside, she was filled with a sense of dread. Today was just another day in a long line of them. The auctioneer, a tall alien with sharp features, called for attention, his voice booming across the crowded space. "Next, we have a very special slave today, a rare specimen from the Outer Rim. She's strong, loyal, and will obey every command. Starting bid 1,000 credits. The girl felt a rush of fear rise in her chest. She had been sold many times before, but each time was just as terrifying as the last. She knew what came after: pain, suffering, never-ending commands that she had to follow, no matter how much they hurt. She couldn't understand why anyone would want her, but there was always someone willing to pay. She didn't notice him at first. The man in the back of the room, standing by the wall, observing everything with quiet interest. He was middle-aged, his face marked by age, but his eyes were kind. He was different from the others in the room, his clothes simple, his face serious, but not cruel. He wasn't staring at the girl like the others. He didn't look at her as though she were a prize to be won or a tool to be used. Instead, his eyes seemed thoughtful. The auctioneer noticed him and made his way to the man. "Interested, sir?" he asked.
Yes.
"She's a fine one. Strong, obedient, would make a fine servant." The man didn't answer right away. He looked at the girl, his gaze softening when their eyes met. She quickly looked away, too afraid to hold his gaze for long. She had seen kindness before, only for it to turn into something else. She couldn't trust anyone anymore. The man slowly raised his hand. "I'll take her," he said, his voice calm but firm. The auctioneer smiled. "A wise choice, sir. She's all yours." The girl felt a rush of panic. Someone had bought her. She had no idea what he wanted, but she could feel his eyes on her. He wasn't looking at her like the others, but that only made her more nervous. She didn't know how to act, what to expect. Was he going to be cruel, like all the others? Would he hurt her? She trembled slightly as the auctioneer handed her over to him, her heart racing in her chest. The man didn't pull her roughly or demand anything from her. He simply nodded to her, his face still calm. "Come with me," he said quietly. The girl hesitated, not sure if she should obey. But he didn't seem angry or aggressive. His voice was calm and even. There was something about his presence that made her feel slightly ... safe. It was a strange feeling, one she hadn't experienced in a long time. Still, she was afraid. She didn't know who this man was, or what he wanted. She had been sold many times before, and each time it had ended the same way. The only thing she knew was that she was a slave, and that was all she would ever be. There was no escaping that. There was no hope, just pain. Always pain. She followed him quietly through the market, her steps unsure. He walked slowly, and she could hear his breathing steady and calm. Every time she tried to catch up, she would hear his soft voice saying, "You don't need to rush." The man led her to a small building on the outskirts of the market. It wasn't much, just a simple place, with a few rooms and basic furniture. Nothing special. Yet for the first time in a long time, the girl felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: curiosity. Was this going to be like all the other places, or would it be different? Inside, the man didn't ask her to do anything. He didn't shout orders or tell her what to do. Instead, he took a seat at a small table and motioned for her to sit across. From him, "You can relax," he said. Relax? She didn't know what that meant anymore. The word felt strange, as if it came from a life she could barely remember. "You're not going to hurt me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She was surprised she had even spoken. The man shook his head. "No, I'm not going to hurt you. I'm not like the others. You don't have to be afraid." The girl didn't know how to respond. She had no idea who this man was, but she could see the sincerity in his eyes. Was he lying? She had heard lies before so many times. But something about his calmness made her want to believe him. "Why?" she asked softly. "Why would you buy me if you're not going to hurt me?" God. The man paused for a moment, then spoke carefully. "Because no one deserves to be treated the way you have been. I want to give you a chance to be free, if only for a little while." Her heart skipped a beat. Free? Could she be free? She had heard people talk about freedom before, but it had never meant anything to her. It was just a word. A dream. But as she looked into his eyes, she began to wonder, could it be real? The girl stood in the small, quiet room, unsure of what to do. Her heart was racing, and her mind was filled with confusion. She had never been in a place like this before. The walls were bare, the furniture simple. The man who had bought her sat at a small table, watching her with a calm expression, as if he wasn't expecting anything from her, wasn't shouting orders or giving harsh commands. He just sat there, waiting, like he was giving her the space she needed. The girl didn't know what to make of it. She had been in this situation so many times before. The fear of being sold, the pain of being treated like a thing she knew it well, but this time it felt different. She didn't understand why. The man looked at her with gentle eyes, as if he was studying her, but not in a way that made her feel uncomfortable. He wasn't judging her, wasn't looking for weakness. It felt like he truly saw her. For the first time, she wasn't just a slave, a broken thing to be used. She felt noticed. "Are you hungry?" he asked softly, breaking the silence. His voice was calm, warm, but there was no urgency to it, no demand. It was a simple question, one that was so normal it almost didn't feel real. She blinked. Surprised? Hungry? She hadn't thought about food in a long time. The last few months had been filled with nothing but fear and pain. She had learned to ignore her body's needs because they didn't matter. But now, this man was asking about her comfort, something she had forgotten to care about. I don't know," she said, her voice trembling. She was afraid to speak, afraid to show any sign of weakness, but the question had taken her by surprise. He stood up slowly, giving her time to react if she was going to. "I have some food. If you want it, it's there," he said, pointing to a small table in the corner. The food looked simple, nothing fancy. It didn't smell bad. The girl felt a strange pull to it, but she hesitated. She was scared to trust him. She didn't know him. She had been hurt too many times by people she trusted. What if this was just another trick? What if the food was poisoned, or worse, part of some new torture? But the man wasn't pushing her. He wasn't demanding she eat. He was simply offering. The decision was hers. Slowly, she walked over to the table and picked up a small piece of bread. She looked at it for a moment, then took a cautious bite. To her surprise, it was good. Fresh, simple. But it filled the emptiness inside her. The man watched her, but he didn't say anything. He gave her space, allowing her to decide on her own. After a few moments, he sat back down at the table, watching her with quiet interest. "You're not like the others," she said softly, her voice still uncertain. The words were out before she could stop herself. She hadn't meant to speak so openly, but something about the man made her feel like she could. He gave a small smile, though it wasn't mocking. "I'm not," he replied simply. "I'm just someone who has seen enough cruelty to last a lifetime. I don't want to be part of it anymore." The girl didn't know what to say. She wasn't sure if she could believe him. There were so many lies in her life. So many people who had promised her safety, only to turn on her later. She had learned not to trust anyone, But this man didn't feel the same as the others. He didn't seem like he was lying. Still, the doubt remained in her mind. Could she really trust him? Could she let herself believe that he was different? She finished the bread slowly, then looked at him. "Why did you buy me?" she asked. It was a question that had been on her mind since the moment he raised his hand at the auction. "What do you want from me?" His gaze softened, and for a moment he didn't answer. Then he spoke, his voice steady but kind. "I didn't buy you to hurt you. I didn't buy you to use you. I bought you because I saw a person, not a slave. And I think you deserve more than what you've been given." The girl felt something shift inside her. She didn't understand it, but the words felt real. There was no cruelty in his voice, no anger, just truth. But it was hard for her to believe. She had been told so many times that she was nothing. She was only valuable as long as she could serve someone else. Could this man really see her as something more? "I don't know how to believe that," she whispered, almost to herself. He nodded as if he understood. "You don't have to believe me right away. Trust takes time. But I'm not going anywhere." "You don't have to do anything you don't want to." Her mind raced. She wasn't used to this kind of kindness, this patience. She had always been forced to obey, forced to survive on the commands of others. And now, this man was asking nothing from her. He was giving her a choice. For the first time, she felt like she wasn't just being controlled, but the fear still lingered in her chest. It was a shadow, one she couldn't quite shake off. It was hard to let go of the habits of survival. It was hard to believe that someone could truly want to help her, that someone could see her as more than just an object. "I don't know who I am anymore," she admitted, her voice small. "I don't know how to be anything else." He didn't say anything for a moment. Instead, he stood up and walked over to her. Slowly, he placed his hand on her shoulder knot, in a way that felt controlling, but simply as a gesture of support. "You don't have to know right now. You don't have to have all the answers. Just take things one day at a time. Know that you're safe here. No one's going to hurt you." The girl looked up at him, her eyes wide. She didn't know how to respond. She didn't know how to react to such simple kindness. But something inside her began to stir, a tiny spark of hope that she hadn't felt in years. Days passed, and life in the small house became something the girl hadn't thought possible. It wasn't perfect, not by any means, but it was peaceful, and for the first time, in what felt like forever, she felt something close to calm, the man. John was patient with her, never asking her to do anything she didn't want to. He didn't push her to speak or to reveal things she wasn't ready to share. In the mornings, he would go about his tasks, quietly preparing food or taking care of the small garden outside. Sometimes he would ask if she wanted to help, but only when it seemed like she was ready. He never forced her to do anything. The rest of the time, he left her to herself, allowing her the space to adjust. The girl spent her days watching him, unsure of what to make of him. She had learned not to trust quickly, but she found herself more and more curious. There was something different about him. His movements were slow, careful, never rushed or angry. His voice, when he spoke to her, was soft and calm. It was a tone she had never heard before, one that made her feel safe, even if she couldn't fully understand why. In the beginning, she spent a lot of time alone in her room, staring at the walls. She didn't know what to do with herself. She had spent so many years being told what to do, following orders without question. Now, she had the freedom to make her own choices, but it felt strange. She wasn't sure how to start. One evening, as she was sitting by the window, John entered the room with a small basket of vegetables. He noticed her looking out at the dark sky, her face thoughtful. "I was wondering," he began, his voice gentle, "if you'd like to learn how to cook. I could use some help, and I think you might enjoy it." The girl turned to him surprised. Cooking? She had never been taught to cook, never even been given the chance to try. But the idea of it felt nice. It was something she could control, something she could do on her own. I don't know how," she admitted, looking down at the ground. "That's okay, John," said with a smile. "I'll teach you. We can start slow." "How does that sound?" She nodded slowly, still unsure, but willing to try. John placed the basket in front of her and showed her how to chop the vegetables. He was patient with her, explaining each step, and never rushing her. As they worked, she felt a strange sense of pride in what she was doing. She wasn't used to feeling that way, but there was something rewarding about the simple task of preparing food. It felt like a small victory, something she could own for herself. As the days turned into weeks, the girl began to find herself more at ease. She would help John around the house, learning little by little. At first, it was simple tasks: washing dishes, sweeping the floor. But as she grew more comfortable, she started to ask questions, curious about things she had never had the chance to learn before. She learned that John wasn't just kind, he was also wise. He had lived a full life, and he shared stories of the places he had been, the things he had seen. He spoke with an open heart, and for the first time, the girl started to feel like she was part of something. One evening after they had finished their meal, John sat down at the table, a cup of tea in his hand. "You know," he began, "I've been thinking. You don't have to stay here forever if you don't want to. You're free to go if that's what you choose." The girl froze, her heart skipping a beat. Free to go? She hadn't expected those words. She thought she was bound to him, tied by the fact that he had bought her. But here he was, offering her a choice. "But you can stay," he added quickly, seeing the surprise on her face. "I just want you to know that you're not trapped. Here, you can do whatever you want with your life." The girl was silent, trying to process what he had said. Free? No one had ever told her she was free. Her mind raced, but it didn't make sense. She had been told her whole life that she was nothing, that she had no choice, no voice. But now, John was telling her that she could choose. The thought was overwhelming, and she wasn't sure what to do with it. "I don't know," she said quietly, unsure of her own feelings. "I've never had a choice before. I don't know what to do." John nodded, understanding. "That's okay. Take your time. You don't have to make any decisions right now. But I want you to know that you have options. You don't have to live in fear anymore." For the first time, the girl felt a small flicker of hope in her chest. She didn't know what her future would look like, but she realized that maybe, just maybe, she had the power to shape it. It was a thought she had never considered before. For so long, she had only survived. Now, she wondered if she could finally start to live. The days that followed were quieter, but they were also filled with small moments that began to change the girl. She found herself spending more time with John, and though she still didn't fully understand the freedom he had given her, she started to notice that her world was different now. There were no harsh commands, no fear of being punished. She was no longer just a slave. She was a person with choices, even if she didn't know exactly what to do with them. John continued to be patient, giving her time to find her way. He never pushed her to do anything, simply shared his life with her, teaching her things in his calm, quiet way. He showed her how to grow a small garden in the backyard, explaining how different plants needed different care. It was simple. But to the girl, it was a new kind of lesson, one that made her feel proud of herself. She had never known anything like it before. In the past, everything she had done had been out of fear or obedience. But now, for the first time, she was doing things because she wanted to. She was learning because she wanted to. As the weeks passed, she found herself looking forward to the little tasks they shared. In the mornings, she would help John prepare the breakfast, learning how to cook different dishes with ingredients from the garden. There was no rush, no pressure, just two people working side by side. Sometimes John would tell her stories of his past, of places he had traveled, of the people he had met. His words were like a window to a world she had never known. She listened intently, fascinated by the idea that there was more to life than what she had experienced. One evening, as they sat outside enjoying the warmth of the setting sun, the girl asked him a question that had been on her mind for some time. "Why are you doing this for me? Why did you buy me? You don't even know me." John looked at her for a long moment, his face thoughtful. "I didn't buy you to change you or to make you do anything. I bought you because I saw you. You were hurting, and I knew I could offer you something better than what you had. But the real reason I'm helping you is because I believe everyone deserves kindness. Everyone deserves a chance to heal." The girl was quiet, taking in his words. She had never thought about kindness in that way before. She had only known cruelty, only known how to survive. But now, for the first time, she felt like she wasn't just surviving. She was starting to live. John's words stayed with her, and as the days went on, she began to notice changes in herself. She was no longer afraid of him, and she wasn't constantly on edge, wondering when the next blow would come. She had learned to trust him, not because he had forced her, but because he had given her space. He had never made her feel small, never made her feel like she was less than him. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she had value. It's not just as a slave, but as a person. One afternoon, as they worked together in the garden, she caught herself smiling. It wasn't forced, and it wasn't out of fear. It was genuine. She was beginning to enjoy the simple things, planting seeds, watching them grow, and even the quiet moments she shared with John. It felt good to be a part of something, to be involved in the world around her. "You're doing great," John said as he watched her carefully tend to the plants. "You're learning fast." She looked up at him, surprised by the compliment. "I didn't think I could," she admitted. "I didn't think I could do anything." John smiled softly. "You can do more than you think. We all can. Sometimes. We just need someone to believe in us." Those words lingered in her mind, and for the first time, she felt like maybe she was more than just a broken thing. Maybe she could be someone who mattered. The thought was still foreign to her, but it was starting to feel possible. That evening, as they sat down to dinner, John noticed the change in her. She wasn't just sitting there quietly anymore. She was asking questions, telling him about her day, sharing small pieces of her life. It wasn't much, but it was progress. John could see it. The girl was slowly coming out of her shell. She was no longer the fearful, silent creature she had been when he first bought her. She was becoming something else. Someone with her own thoughts, her own voice. After dinner, as they cleaned up, John asked, "What do you want to do next? I know you're not ready to make any big decisions, but what do you want for yourself? You have choices now." The girl stopped, her hands frozen for a moment as she processed his question. What did she want? She'd never had the chance to ask herself that before. All she had known was surviving. But now, she had the freedom to choose. She could decide what to do with her life. The thought was both terrifying and exciting. I don't know," she said slowly. "I've never really thought about it. But maybe I could learn more. I could try new things." John nodded, understanding. "That's a good place to start. Just take it one step at a time. And if you ever need help or want to talk about it, I'm here." The girl looked at him, her heart swelling with something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Real hope. It wasn't a promise of a perfect future, but it was a chance for something better. She didn't know what that something was yet, but she was beginning to believe that it could exist. That she could exist as more than just a victim of her past. For the first time in her life, she felt like she had a future. And it was a future she could shape with her own hands. As the weeks passed, the girl began to see the world around her in a way she never had before. Life with John had changed her. It wasn't just the food, the garden, or the simple tasks she now enjoyed. It was the feeling of being seen, of being respected, of knowing that she was no longer just a tool for someone else's use. She was a person, and she was starting to believe that she could build a life for herself. John had never asked for anything in return, but the girl began to feel a deep sense of gratitude toward him. He had shown her a kindness she had never known, and that kindness had given her the strength to begin healing. Slowly, she started to take more responsibility around the house, offering to help in ways she had never considered before. She learned how to mend clothes, how to clean the house, and how to care for the garden. It wasn't much, but it was a start. It was something she could do with her own hands. One day, as she worked in the garden, John approached her with a question that caught her off guard. "Have you ever thought about going to the market?" he asked, his tone casual but with a hint of curiosity. The girl stopped, holding a watering can in her hands, and looked at him. "The market," she repeated. "Why would I go there?" John smiled softly, as if he understood her confusion. Well, it's a place where people buy and sell things. You've never been? No. Maybe you'd like to go and see it. It might help you understand that there's more out there than just what's here. The girl thought about it for a moment. Going to the market seemed like something so simple, yet it filled her with a strange sense of dread. She had been sold. At a market before, treated like an object. The thought of returning to a place like that made her nervous. But at the same time, she realized that it could be a chance to take another step, to explore the world around her. I don't know, she said quietly. What if it's like before? What if they treat me the same way? John nodded, understanding her fear. I promise you it won't be like before. You're not going to be sold, and no one's going to treat you that way again. You're free now, and you have a choice in everything, if you don't want to. Go, that's okay, but I think you're strong enough to take that step. The girl hesitated. She wasn't sure if she was ready, but she trusted John. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel completely trapped by fear. She could feel that she had changed, that she was becoming someone new. Someone who could make decisions for herself. Maybe I will, she said softly, surprising herself. Maybe I'll go and see what it's like. John smiled, his eyes warm. Take your time. There's no rush. But if you do go, I'll be with you. The next day, John and the girl set out for the market. It wasn't far, just a short walk from the house. The girl felt a knot of nervousness in her stomach. But as they approached the market, she realized that it wasn't the terrifying place she had imagined. It was busy, full of people talking, laughing, and haggling for goods. It was noisy, but there was no sense of danger. It was just a place where people came to buy what they needed at first. The girl stuck close to John, her eyes scanning the crowd. She was afraid someone would recognize her, that they would see her as a slave, as something to be used. But John didn't let her retreat into her old habits. He gently took her hand and guided her through the crowd, pointing out the different stalls and the people selling their goods. He showed her the fruits and vegetables, the small trinkets, and the simple pleasures people came here for. The girl was amazed by how normal it all felt. She had spent so many years in fear, always expecting the worst. But now, for the first time, she was seeing a world that wasn't out to hurt her. It was just a world full of people living their lives. She was part of it, just as much as anyone else. After a while, they stopped at a small stall selling flowers. The girl had always loved flowers, but she had never been able to enjoy them. They had always seemed out of reach, something only for people who weren't like her. But now, standing in front of the stall, she felt a strange pull. She reached out and touched one of the flowers gently, its petals soft against her fingertips. John watched her with a knowing smile. Do you like them? He asked. The girl nodded, her voice soft. I've never had a flower before, never really seen one up close. John smiled again, this time with a sense of pride. Well, now you can. Have one. The girl turned to him, surprised. For me? For you, he said with a nod. You've earned it. Go ahead. With trembling hands, the girl picked out a small bouquet, carefully choosing the flowers she liked best. As she paid for them, she felt a sense of warmth that she couldn't quite explain. It was such a simple thing, a small gesture, but it meant more to her than she could say. As they walked home, the girl held the flowers carefully in her hands, looking at them as if they were the most precious thing in the world. She had never thought she could have something like this, something just for her. But now, she realized that she could. She had choices. She had control over her life. And for the first time, it felt like it was hers to shape. The next few weeks were a time of change for the girl. The small, quiet life she had started with John was now something that felt real. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments when fear crept into her mind, but they were becoming less and less frequent. More and more, she felt like she was becoming who she was meant to be, not just a shadow of someone else's expectations. One morning, as she worked in the garden, John approached her, a gentle smile on his face. You've been doing a great job here, he said. The garden is looking better every day. The girl smiled back, her heart swelling with pride. She had worked hard in the garden, and it had become a place where she could find peace. The small plants she had nurtured seemed to grow alongside her. They were reminders of how much she had changed. Not so long ago, she had been afraid to do anything, to trust anyone. Now, she was taking responsibility for something and doing it well. Thank you, she said quietly. It was still hard for her to accept praise, but she was learning to take it. She had learned to believe in herself, little by little. That belief was starting to shape her into someone new. John nodded, taking a moment to look around. You've come a long way, he said, his voice full of quiet admiration. And I think it's time for the next step. The girl looked at him, a bit confused. Next step? What do you mean? John smiled and sat down next to her on the ground. You've been learning a lot here. I think you're ready to do more than just live day by day. You've got the strength inside you to take on bigger things. You've got a future waiting for you. The girl's heart raced. Future. It was a word she had never truly understood. She had always lived in the present, always surviving, always thinking about the next moment of safety. But now, as she listened to John's words, something shifted inside her. Maybe she could have a future. Maybe she could make something of herself. What do you mean? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She wasn't sure if she was ready to take such a big step, but a small part of her was eager to know what John meant. She was tired of feeling stuck in the past, tired of only surviving. I think it's time you've thought about what you want to do, John said gently. You're not a slave anymore. You're free. You don't have to stay here forever if you don't want to. You can go out into the world, find your place, and make your own decisions. You've already shown me how strong you are. I believe you can do anything you set your mind to. The girl looked at him, her heart pounding in her chest. Never considered that before. She had never thought that she could choose a path for herself, that she could step out into the world and make something of her life. She had always been told where to go, what to do, who to be. But now, for the first time, she was hearing that she could be anything. She could be someone. But I don't know where to start, she said softly. I don't know what I want. John smiled and put a hand on her shoulder. That's okay. You don't have to have all the answers right now, but you have the freedom to choose. You can start small, just like you've been doing. You're already on the right path. The girl thought about it for a moment, the weight of his words sinking in. She could feel the stirrings of something inside her, a spark of hope, of possibility. She didn't know what her future held, but for the first time in her life, she was beginning to believe that it could be hers to shape. That afternoon, after working in the garden, John suggested they go to the town again. You've been doing so well here, he said. Maybe it's time to see more of the world, to explore. You never know what you might find. The girl hesitated. She had already seen the market, and while it hadn't been as terrifying as she had feared, the thought of going out again made her anxious. But this time it felt different. She wasn't going out because she had to. She was going out because she wanted to. She had a choice. Okay, she said finally, her voice still unsure, but stronger than before. I'll go with you. They walked through the town, passing by the familiar stalls and buildings. This time, though, the girl walked with a sense of confidence she had never had before. She didn't feel like a stranger, like someone who didn't belong. She was part of the world now, part of something bigger than herself, as they walked. John pointed out the different shops and areas of the town. You could find work here if that's what you want, he said. There's always something to do, something to learn. The girl nodded slowly. The thought of finding work, of making her own way in the world, was still overwhelming. But it didn't feel as impossible as it once had. She had learned so much already: how to care for a garden, how to cook, how to be responsible. Maybe she could learn more. Maybe she could find her place in this world. They stopped at a small cafe where John bought them both a drink. As they sat together, the girl looked around, taking in the sights and sounds of the town. It wasn't the terrifying place she had once imagined. It was a place of possibilities, a place where people lived their lives and made their own choices. This is it, isn't it? She said quietly. This is what it feels like to be free. John smiled. Yes, this is what it feels like. And for the first time in her life, the girl truly understood what freedom meant. It wasn't just about being able to do whatever you wanted. It was about having the power to choose your own path, to build your own future. And for the first time, she believed that she could do it.